Manimekalai ma'am, shall we start the session, ma'am?
We can start.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, one and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all for this 1 month gender sensitization and capacity building program on gender, society, economy, and polity, organized by Department of Women's Studies, Balidasan University, Center for Women's Studies, and National Service Scheme of Kaveri College for Women and Regional Association for Women's Studies. I welcome you all. May I now request Dr. N. Murugeshwari, Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Balidas University, to render welcome address. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Neela. A very good afternoon to all. We welcome you all for the 1 month gender sensitization program. Today we have very important topic with our resource person. The coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic creates a grave health threat to indigenous peoples around the world. Indigenous communities already they experienced poor access to healthcare, significantly higher rates of communicable and non-communicable diseases, lack of access to essential services, sanitation, and other preventive measures. So as the number of COVID-19 infections rises worldwide, as well as the high mortality rates among certain vulnerable groups with underlying health conditions, data on the rate of infection in indigenous people also are either not yet available. So based on this view, today we have our resource person from New Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University, School of Social Sciences, Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies. Professor Archana Prasad is here to share her views on gender issues in tribal communities in the COVID-19. On behalf of Department of Women's Studies, Baridasan University, NSS Kaveri College for Women and Regional Association for Women's Studies, and on behalf of all the participants, I welcome Professor Archana Prasad. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you.
On behalf of the organizers, I welcome all the vibrant participants. I welcome the organizing committee members, Professor Manimekalai ma'am, Dr. Neela, Dr. Shubha, and Dr. Shamim Bono. So once again, I welcome you all for the 1 month gender sensitization program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm welcome. May I now request Professor N. Manimekalai, Director and Head, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Department of Women's Studies, Balidasan University, to introduce our today's resource person. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Neela. Almost we are moving to the end of the 1 month program. Tomorrow it will be over. So we will miss all the vibrant participants, as rightly pointed out by Professor Murugeshwari. And we have Dr. Archana Prasad, who is currently a professor at the Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies, School of Social Sciences, JNU, a well-known professor, activist, and researcher, particularly on the areas of the marginalized, the least recognized community, the tribal communities, and also the other marginalized. And I've been associated with her in the IWS discussions, and I very much observe what are the, how much efforts has been made by her to bring out the issues that these oppressed section or the marginalized and excluded are facing. And yesterday we had listened to Anita Gai, where she was talking about the disability and the kind of issues that they face in the COVID context. But indigenous people, irrespective of whether it is COVID or other regions, they face difficulties in accessing to the mainstream facilities, be it the infrastructure or the other opportunities. In that sense, they are excluded. And as long as they stay there, close to nature, of course, they've been serving playing a community role, protecting the environment, and they made up their livelihood with the nature. But now things are changing, and you all know how we also listen to lectures, and now this environmental impact assessment 2020 report has been there for circulation and how much it is going to affect these indigenous people. If as such the EIA is going to be implemented, where you are going to allow all the industries to occupy the places which otherwise been occupied by the indigenous people as forest area or other reserved areas, and in those aspects it will be directly impacting the indigenous population, the tribal communities, and they are the very, in my opinion, the most marginalized communities. And so on this topic she'll be talking, and it will be interesting to hear from Vachana, and she'll be talking for about 50 minutes or so. And we have the composition of participants who are teachers in the colleges, both from men studies and other disciplines, and also mostly social science disciplines, and languages, etc. And some of them are from Northeast, so good that we get representation from our friends from Northeast states also, and across other states. And there are around 100 and odd, close to 150 or 60 participants. They will slowly be joining, and they are very active participants too. And so to add some more words about Professor Archana, she was also the chairperson of the center between 2014 and 16. She specializes in research on the contemporary history of Adivasi livelihoods, labor and resistance, women and labor, environmental and labor history. She has also been helping many grassroots organizations in their work with home-based workers. So when we work, of course, you have to associate with grassroots organizations, and the kind of the dynamics that is taking place will be kept informed through those organizations. So Archana is also doing that. And she is also the associate editor of an important journal, a tri-continental journal, Agrarian South, Journal of Political Economy, published by Surge Publications. It is a very prestigious work and contribution, and title too, I should say. Her books include Against Ecological Romanticism, Verrier Elwin, and The Making of Tribal Identity, 2011, 3 essays, and Environmentalism and the Left, 2004, Leftward, published by Leftward, The Red Flag of the War Lies, and The History of Ongoing Struggle, 2017, again published by Leftward, and co-authored with Sarika Chowdhury, Struggling for Nation Building, History of All India Bank Officers Association, 2018, Agar. So very, very important contributions, and she has her papers published in journals also. She hasn't informed here, but still I can say that articles in Economic and Political Weekly and other renowned journals also she published. And so blends herself as an activist and the researcher, the serious researcher on this area. And it is right that we haven't had any discussion on this particular topic at all for the past 1 month, and so we can't afford to exclude also. So thanks that Archana could be available here, and who is the person who is continuously working on this area, and definitely be a treat for us to listen to her. Archana, please.
Dr. Mrugeshwari, Dr. Neela, and my friend Mani Mekla Raya, thank you for inviting me for this important program, which I think should be the mandate of every department, not only the Women's Studies department, because it's time now that gender issues are integrated into mainstream syllabus. And not only gender, I would say even environmental issues should be integrated into mainstream syllabi, so that people sort of start taking up and discussing and building a consciousness about these important issues. Now, the topic being given to me is gender issues in tribal communities in pandemic times. Now, I would like to, in fact, divide my talk in maybe 3 parts. The first part, I want to really deal with the way in which without getting into the semantics of tribal, Adivasi, what is the debate on it? I mean, if we get into that, we could have a class for 5 hours also. So I don't want to really get into that. But I want to talk about how scholarship has basically seen gender issues in tribal areas and in tribal studies first. Then I'd like to talk about a bit about the context of the pandemic and what was happening to Adivasi women. Then in the last, I'd like to talk about the implications of the pandemic and how the pandemic's impact is sort of structured in these structural transformations, is embedded, sorry, not structured, but embedded in these structural transformations. And by embedding them in the structural transformations, the sort of the systemic discrimination against the Adivasis and their sort of vulnerabilities are only amplified more. It's not as if those vulnerabilities did not exist earlier also, but they are amplified more. For example, for women, they always did much more of the unpaid work, and social reproduction was always their important responsibility. And during the lockdown, women became more and more burdened by the task of unpaid work and social reproduction. This not only I'm saying it, even the International Labour Organization puts it very well when it says that, in fact, the impact of the pandemic on women cannot be seen merely in terms of the loss of employment, but also the kind of pressures that have been put on women from working from home, including issues related to increased violence and stress and those kind of things. And in fact, if you look at data coming in from Spain and Italy and all, people are talking about how women suffered in that manner. Now, if women are impacted in such a their vulnerability and their sort of stress is exemplified by the pandemic, there's no reason to doubt that the impact of the pandemic will also be amplified. Yeah, that the impact of the pandemic will also be amplified on the Adivasis because they face almost similar, what should I say, systemic discrimination in a much more exaggerated sense. Now, even within the Adivasis, I think one thing that I want to clearly point out at the outset is that if you look at Adivasi societies, it's a grossly uneven society. This is actually a perception and a view that I'm giving you that is a counter view to the dominant scholarship, where you're always saying that Adivasi women, anthropologists always argue that the Adivasi society is much egalitarian, that it's women have more sexual and moral freedom and all those kinds of issues. But in our perception and in the way in which we have been looking at Adivasis for the last 30 to 35 years, we have found two things. First of all, there are two types of societies in Adivasis. One is the patriarchal society, which is like a normal patriarchal society. And then you have the matrilineal society, where the descent is traced through the mother and the property right also belongs to the mother. But that matrilineal society is not really a matriarchal society where women have political and economic power. They may own property, but they do not have that power because the what should I say, the position of the wife in a patriarchal society, that is a Purush Pradhan society, or where the head of the family is a man, the position of the wife is much weaker than the position of the husband in a matrilineal society. For example, if you look at Garo, Khasi, Jayantiyas, and all these kinds of people, you find communities, you find that in that a woman cannot have a second marriage. Her marriage has to be approved by the clan, whose head is normally the man. The husband is considered the manager of the property. So even though the wife has, property rights, she cannot manage it autonomously. So there are several of these things which several professors in the Northeast have actually studied also. So since this is the case, we find that even in the matrilineal society, in fact, patriarchy has pervaded it. And what is happening today is that the collective property of Adivasis in the tribal societies of the north, in the matrilineal societies, that is Garo, Khasi, Jaintia, is now being privatized, where in fact parents are saying we also have to give sons rights. Similar thing is not happening in patriarchal Adivasi societies. So the simple point that I'm trying to make is that there is a structured inequality between men and women in Adivasi societies. And this structured inequality is seen. And this structured inequality is seen even in work patterns. What are the work patterns in which these structured inequalities are seen? For example, in my years of work in different parts of central and eastern India, I've found that most of the minor forests produce collection for household purposes, is carried out by the women. But the commercially important produce, like honey, like sal seed, like vera, the women may help in collecting it, but the profits for that are harnessed by the men, because that produce is harnessed by the men. For example, the Adivasis on whom I did my PhD and postdoctoral work, in these places, if agricultural work has to be done on the lands of big landlords, the men will not go to do that work. Only the women will be farm servants. It is considered beyond the dignity of men. It is considered beyond the dignity of men to work in other people's fields. Men will, in fact, men will, in fact, what should I say? They will migrate to work in other people's, but in their own locality, they will not work. In their own district also, they will not work. The people who will work in their own locality and own district are the women. So very often you will find very often you will find in the Adivasi societies that men who have come back from some area after work are basically sitting at home on a charpai, playing something, sleeping, idling their time, whereas women are actually going to the neighboring villages to do work. By the same measure, till at least the early 2000s, what you found was that far less women were considered migrant workers in the Adivasi than men, because it was the men who were really going out for 3 to 4 months to get extra income or to get higher paying jobs. For example, in mining, the only sector where women thronged the labor force before the early 2000s was the construction sector. That was the brick kiln sector and the construction sector. Even in domestic work, you will see that the influx of live-out migrants, live-out domestic workers or migrants domestic workers or migrants. Very few were Adivasis. There were a whole lot of Dalits in that. It is after 2000s when the rise in domestic work has risen a lot, that the pace of it has risen a lot, that you find that the internal state-to-state migration of domestic workers is becoming much higher. And one of my students who's actually done MPhil, who has done an MPhil on this, basically argues that it is because of the rising agrarian distress and dispossession that more and more Adivasi girls and women actually migrated, and more of them were also subjected to human trafficking. So the point that I'm trying to make is that with neoliberalism, there has been a definite change, and that definite change, the audio is not clear. Is the audio not clear?
It's clear, ma'am. It's audible, ma'am.
No,
it's audible, ma'am.
The audio is not clear. That's why.
Very clear.
Having some trouble, ma'am.
It is very much clear.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's fine.
Yeah. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it is after the crisis of the early years of the 2000s that you see the period for which Adivasi migration is taking place is becoming longer and longer and longer. For example, in the 2005 and 6, when I did a resurvey of some Chhattisgarh areas, I really found that even in Madhya Pradesh areas, I really found that even people with land of 10 hectares were migrating for 4 months of a year. The point that I'm simply trying to make is that the persistent and rising agrarian distress was a death blow to the local work patterns, of the Adivasi society. And this was largely because an overwhelming portion of the Adivasi society was basically dependent on agrarian related activities for their livelihood, especially the Adivasi women. Why I'm saying that is especially the Adivasi women, because these Adivasi women were doing all the local movement types, which in fact Adivasi men were not doing. So this gender segregation in the work pattern is very much evident in Adivasi societies. But another interesting factor that we need to take into account is the following. It is the fact that from 2012 onwards, we know that women's employment has declined to abysmally historic low levels. And today I'm saying, after looking at even the 2018-19 data, that this decline is driven by loss of work by the Adivasi women. And this loss of work is basically fueled by two or three structural things. One is the increasing rate of dispossession in Adivasi societies. And this increasing rate of dispossession has also given rise to an increasing situation of conflict within Adivasi societies. That conflict is now a direct conflict, not between the state and the Adivasis, but between the corporate houses who are supported by the state and the Adivasis in forest and other agriculture-rich regions. So these Adivasis are now basically migrating, not simply in a gendered manner, but in fact the increasing rate of Adivasi migration is fueled by a quantum jump in the rate of migration of Adivasi women to the cities. Secondly, what we find is that there has been a severe asset dispossession within Adivasis. And this severe asset dispossession within the Adivasis is, in fact, one of the main reasons of the main reason for this asset dispossession is the growing rate of urbanization in project-oriented areas. And this growing rate of urbanization in these project-oriented areas has in fact led to the lack of absorption of Adivasi labor in agrarian societies. Thirdly, which were the sectors before 2012 that were really expanding. They were domestic work, and they were retail, and they were construction work. These are the areas, and domestic work, and construction work also includes the brick kiln. These are the areas where new forms of patriarchy, in fact, pervaded the system. What were these new forms of patriarchy? These new forms of patriarchy were, in fact, the labor contracts. These labor contracts were family contracts. In brick kilns, this was going on for a long time. But if you go to the labor chalk in Gurugram, I made my master's students do a survey of that. If you go to the labor chalk in Gurugram, you in fact find that the man of the house is contracting for the entire family, including children. So this is the other issue that is becoming very important about what are the labor rights, of the Adivasi women, and how these labor rights are being impacted through a neoliberal disinvestment. Now, before getting into the pandemic, I want to make one last point about the structural transformations. And what I really would like to say is that this structural transformation has to be seen in a broader framework of uneven and combined development. What do I say when I mean that? By that, I really mean that there is not only an uneven development between regions, but there is also an uneven development within social groups. And this uneven development within social groups is most starkly reflected in Adivasis and in Dalits. For example, the increasing informalization and casualization of work in different sectors of even the organized manufacturing sector has led to wage discriminations where in fact Adivasis and Dalits by all ground reality are paid much lesser than others. Within that, the gender gap is even higher. So, what we find is, the other thing is that the Adivasi response to these inequalities in terms of identity movements is equally patriarchal in character, because its demands are largely gender neutral. So if we think that we can remove the patriarchal consciousness from Adivasi society by simply removing the inequality that is existing because of capitalism, we are probably not correct in this assessment. So, having said that, and having said that the rate of migration is far higher, the rate of hunger is far higher in Adivasis, the rate of malnutrition is far higher, all these things are well known. We know that because of lack of rations, because of all this biometric system and all, there are hunger deaths in Jharkhand Adivasis in normal circumstances. Now, when we come to the pandemic, I'm not even talking about the denial of rights, which I can answer in questions. Now, when we come to the pandemic, to the impact of the pandemic, what do we find? Now, the pandemic hit India on the 30th of January. Everybody knows all the facts of the case. The lockdown was on the 23rd, 24th of March. Once there was a lockdown, people wanted to go back. And then some free ration services and all were announced. Our experience during the relief work is that access to rations, free rations and ration distribution also existed more amongst the privileged sections of the society rather than the unprivileged sections of the disprivileged sections of the society. Secondly, in many places, women were stuck without work in their homes while their men had migrated for work. Yeah? So, these women were basically stuck without food, water, and any money. At the same time, the men of the Adivasi communities had lost their jobs. Many of them were not even paid for the work that they had done earlier. In the sense, their employers just got up and kaputted from them. Yeah? So, you had construction sites with a lot of Adivasi labor, which were basically, forget all the social distancing business, physical distancing. You forget it, because there were crowded camps, construction camps, where migrant labor could not move and they had very little to eat. And slowly, these Adivasi migrants started going home. A good case is that, I'm forgetting her name, of a very famous case of a 12-year-old tribal girl who had migrated from Chhattisgarh to Telangana on contract labor. And she started walking back because her employers told her that since they are not going to get their money, they cannot pay her anything. And she started walking back with the other Adivasis, and she died in the middle of that. How many of those deaths actually exist because of the lack of access to basic facilities in pandemic times? There's no account of these deaths. These are also, in my opinion, COVID deaths. The second thing that you find is that already before the pandemic, what you find is that there was a return migration taking place because of the job crisis, which means that Adivasi men were going back to their villages because they were not getting jobs in urban areas anymore, correct? And if they were not getting jobs in the urban areas, they were taking over the low-paid jobs of the Adivasi women. And between 2012 and 2019, you will see that there's a sudden spurt in women who are not part of the labor force, the proportion of women who are not part of the labor force. And this spurt is largely because women kept going out for work and they did not get work. So what we call the discouraged worker impact. In fact, the women who were only doing household duties and the women who were indulging in free collection of fuel wood and other things for their social reproduction, these women, in fact, their percentage in the employment data, which is again a very unreliable, fuzzy, underestimated data. Yeah, these women, the proportion of these women increased by almost 7, 8, 9%, whereas the work participation rate came down by 7 or 8%. So what the worker population ratio? So the point that I'm trying to make is that the lack of employment for Adivasi men impacted on the work of Adivasi women, the availability of work for Adivasi women, creating a social reproduction crisis, a crisis of employment and a social reproduction crisis. And this in itself created a competition. Now, can you imagine what will happen after the pandemic? When, in fact, according to the ILO, in India, around 60% of the working hours have been lost so far. Casual workers are the most badly impacted. And these casual workers are largely fueled by Dalits and Adivasis. That is the dispossessed reserve army of labor. So can you imagine what will happen when the jobs open up? It's once again going to be a competition between men and women, because men will be willing to work for lower wages. The reservation wage will come down and the real wages will come down. So a society that was already under a severe crisis of social reproduction, that crisis of social reproduction has in fact intensified manifold. And every time a crisis intensifies manifold, the women are impacted the worst, because they have to scrounge for the daily survival, which becomes even more difficult. Now, this is one aspect. The second thing we have is reports that are coming in, that Adivasi men who have gone back, many of them are testing corona positive, even with the limited testing that happens. And the lack of health facilities and testing facilities, or the cost of those facilities, is getting them into a bad mess. So what you actually have is a rural spread of the virus, whose depth nobody knows, and a highly imbalanced public health infrastructure in which the Adivasi areas were also really weak. Now, the last point that I want to come is what Mani had in fact mentioned when she talked about the EIA 2020, that it's not merely the economic distress arising out of the pandemic and the social crisis that will result out of that. It is also the growing state repression in Adivasi areas. What I mean by that? I mean that the changes in laws which will bring about further dispossession and crisis of social reproduction are taking place. The changes in law are taking place at a very fast pace, without any regard for people who are being dispossessed, without any regard for people who are being dispossessed. So the EIA 2020 is brought in during the lockdown. It's not translated into any languages. These are the problems that have persisted. But by doing that, now Adivasi right activists, journalists in Adivasi areas are being picked up. Yeah, and when they go to the court saying they are afraid of the pandemic, the court says your charges are too severe, you better remain inside. So on the one hand, no protest can take place. On the one hand, no protest can take place because social gatherings are banned, this, that. On the other hand, the state is unleashing its entire repressive power and its intent towards greater structural reforms which will put Adivasis at a much worse, much greater disadvantage, is pushing ahead with those reforms in a manner that will further create the crisis of social reproduction in Adivasi regions. So the repression of the state is increasing, the social unrest is increasing. We don't know what is simmering under the blanket law and order imposition. The blanket law and order imposition by the state, where the pandemic is being really treated like a law and order problem rather than a health crisis. So we don't know what is simmering and what is going to happen once it starts opening up or once it does open up. Will it lead to a greater polarization between that? Will it lead to a reversal of the rights movement? Will it lead to a reversal of forest rights? We don't know what will happen, because from all reports that are coming, and in fact 2 days ago, the Citizen for Justice and Peace, Peace and Justice, was having a seminar, a webinar, where they were interviewing Adivasis from different areas of the country. And in that we found that in fact the forest department has increased the pressure for evictions. And it's also not allowing people to go and collect minor forest produce on which a large part of their cash income was dependent. So the pandemic is being used to evict people from forested areas, which was being severely resisted before the lockdown. So I think what I'll do is, I think I've given you a broad overview of what I think is the systemic structural discrimination and inequalities within the Adivasi life, how these have been deepened by neoliberalism, and how this deepening has been made worse. The disparities have been made worse. The power asymmetries have been made worse by the pandemic, whose impact is yet to fully unfold. One example I can give you through my own study, which we did a pan-India study on domestic workers, many of whom are Adivasis. 77% have lost their jobs. Even though the government says that you can come back to work, people are not willing to make them come back to work. And many of these live-out workers, and who are from Bengal, Jharkhand, these regions, Rajasthan, many of them are Adivasis and Dalits. They are being told that you cannot work. Many of them are sole earners of their family because their husbands are also in informal employment and have lost their jobs. So these are the kind of anecdotal evidences that are coming out. We yet have to do a much more systematic study, but we know that the use of the pandemic is also being made to basically hand over natural resources to big capital. And the need for resistance is more urgent than ever before. I think I'll stop over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your mind-blowing words.
Madam, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Madam, in Karnataka, there are 50 tribals constitute 7%, whereas in Andhra it is 9.08%. In Tamil Nadu, it's only 1.10% of tribals. And Kattunayaka and this Kammam, they are very common tribes in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Whereas in Andhra, it is 32 tribes are there, constituting 9.08%. So my question here is that, particularly with regard to the Labor Contract Act, which was earlier there, now has been merged into 4 important acts. The new Labor Contract Act says that basically the person, the contractor who brings the laborers, he is liable to pay the benefits to the workers in case if the owner has not paid the benefits to the workers. I don't know how far these labor laws are helpful. That's one thing that I wanted to tell you. Other one is you are telling about a Muria tribal girl. She's from Chhattisgarh. She died before reaching her native. 10 kilometers before she died, and her name is Jita Medakami, it seems. She's from Chhattisgarh, Jita Medakami. This is only my observation, madam. It's not a question. My question is about this labor laws, Contract Labor Act. The new Labor Act will be helpful to the tribals. That's what I wanted to just say. Thank you, madam.
Would you like to reflect on that, Archana? Otherwise, I'll just make some observations or make seek clarifications. One is about the encroachment of in this pandemic. As it was discussed that the corporate are encroaching the lands and assets of these tribal population. Already there has been a crisis and people have migrated, and only area where feminization labor could be seen is with the domestic work, and that too from the Adivasis. So is it that this pandemic is being utilized by the state to really implement whatever has been there in the agenda, and particularly affecting the vulnerable, including the Adivasi? And second is about the minor forest producers. So with the kind of the mobility restriction, is it happening in this pandemic as also in the rural belt, that they are prevented even in those areas where it was permitted earlier to collect the minor forest producers, which was really helping meeting their livelihood?
Yeah. Should I respond to these first? Should I respond to these, Meera?
Hello.
Yeah, yes.
Some chat box, I don't know whether some questions are there, Neela? I haven't.
No, ma'am, there is no question.
Okay, you respond to
No,
these. Yeah.
No, there's a person.
Yeah, then you can.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Participants, if you want to ask, you please unmute, and then
Yes, ma'am, you can ask. Yes.
Yeah. A long time, there has been a big struggle between the Adivasis and the state over the forest rights. So before migration or after migration, what is the status of this conflict? Could you please enlighten me?
Yeah.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking, ma'am.
No, I got it. I got your question.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah. Then if there are other questions, please raise so that we will take them totally and then respond. Is there anybody else who is raising questions? Otherwise, we'll respond to this first. Anita, you're asking? Okay, Archana, I think you can.
No, there is a question on which
There is one question, the chat box. Yes, ma'am.
in the chat box. There's a question on which hunting.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any other question in the chat box?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. So I think I'll take all the questions together, and these are very important questions that have been raised. Firstly, I want to say that you see a small, if you look at the labor patterns within Adivasi life, it's a severely underestimated figure that you come up with, because most of the Adivasis are working through networks which do not have formal contracts. So they don't even, many of them don't even come under the contract labor law which was existing earlier or which exists in some diluted form even today. So the contractor has to give benefit. The contractor has to give benefit, but this benefit is only accruable in the organized sector, in which very few Adivasis actually work. So what we have, first of all, is a non-recognition of Adivasi, work, which has been quite sort of source of struggle for long. And in fact, even within the mainstream trade union movement, what you cover Adivasis by going sector-wise, but actually the concerns of Adivasis in informal labor are only taken up within the broad rubric of informal labor. The specificities of that are not really tackled within organizations itself. So my question to the labor law contract is that, first of all, even for non-Adivasis, the exploitation by contractor is unchecked and even more deregulated than it was before in the mining sector, in the construction sector, and all these. But what you find increasingly with the Adivasis is that they don't come through contractors anymore. How do they come? They come to the labor chalk and they stand there, and the dhandawalas or the contractor walas, they come to the labor chalk and make the contract. So there's no formal contract. It's a day-to-day contract. Secondly, you cannot fix an Adivasi person. You cannot fix an Adivasi person. Let me put it this way, into one sector, because that person who's a casual worker, even though a migrant worker, but a casual worker will move from sector to sector depending on the availability of job. This is the new feature of the job market, that you have what we call a generalized casualization of work and actually a very less specialized workforce. So by skilling people, you are actually going to limit their options, because what people want is a low-paid generalized workforce, and the gaps between a skilled workforce, where in fact the jobs are very few and far between. So if the government is telling you that the Adivasis are not getting jobs because they are not skilled or they don't have contracts, I don't think you should believe them, because that is not what the history of the last 25 years is. So the point that I'm trying to make is, if you look at domestic work also, some of them come through placement agencies, but they are mostly live-in workers. For live-out workers, and even for many live-in workers, it's through really a social network system that they come. And these network systems are not under any obligation of any contracts. So the point that I'm trying to make is the greater informalization process is going to become, is going to make the contract system even more oppressive, because the informalization process doesn't afford you any protection or recognition of your work, and 99% of the Adivasis are in work like this. Yes. Now, on the encroachment question, on the forest rights. Okay, I'll take the mobility, encroachment, and minor forest produce and forest rights question together. Let me first take the witch hunting question. Increasing witch hunting. Increasing witch hunting is in fact symptomatic of symptomatic of the increasing patriarchal oppression of Adivasi women. And this patriarchal oppression is in fact a result of, and this patriarchal oppression is in fact a result of the growing distress within Adivasi life itself. Now, the issue of minor forest produce, encroachments, and forest rights is linked together, including the conflict question is linked together. Now, if you look at the implementation of forest rights since its inception, I think one thing that is to be noted is that the act as it was passed was not an ideal act. It did not take into account many of the rights of the Adivasis that we had wanted in the act. Of course, it made many great strides. It was a historic act. It made many, many great strides, but it did not provide enough protection against eviction. It did not provide enough protection against eviction. Now, you see, the non-implementation of forest rights was something, are you saying that I should exit, Nida? Nida?
No.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
No, continue.
Yeah.
No.
So, the non-implementation of the rights was prevalent right from the beginning. And these rights were basically squeezed out in the following way. Firstly, the notices by the government that certain people are exempt from laws of the land if they have certain type of projects is in the mining and other sectors, basically ignored the compliance with forest rights. Then there were notifications that were bought out. Then there were notifications that were bought out, which in fact stated that the Forest Rights Act will not apply to certain, would not apply to certain types of activities. Then you had several exemptions under environmental clearances. So what, then some conservationists went to court, and when they went to court, the court basically said that those whose claims are rejected should be thrown out of the forest immediately. And then the Adivasi rights organizations together went to court and got a stay on it. This was the position of forest rights before the pandemic set in. So what we had is actually almost 1.6 crore people being denied forest rights even before the pandemic set in. And what Manimekha is asking about encroachment, in fact, by doing this and by easing the laws of acquisition and diversion, the existing encroachment was already being regularized and legitimized by the government. Was already being regularized and legitimized by the government. So this factor has to be taken into account, and the EIA 2020 is only the formal expression and a much big furtherance of these measures that were taking place. Now it's true that the Forest Right Acts give you some rights over minor forest produce, and this access had in fact improved after the Forest Rights Act. But what happened with the pandemic was that even in areas where there was no pandemic, the lockdown was being imposed. And the Forest Department used the lockdown to stop people from accessing the forest and collecting minor forest produce even for their daily needs. These are the reports that are really coming in. Now, how do we know whether there was pandemic or not? We don't really know because there's no real testing in these areas. Rural areas are some of the least tested areas in the country. So if there's no testing, on what basis is the lockdown being imposed? That I do not understand. And since the lockdown is being imposed, no money, no cash income is being had by the Adivasis. So they cannot grow their own food. They cannot access free rations because of the uneven distribution. They have no income support. I think I don't need to say much more after that, what will happen to the Adivasis. I expect much more growing hunger and much more, even maybe mortality within Adivasi society after this. So what we want is that in fact the pandemic highlights the greater urgency to not dilute the PESA, the 5th schedule, the 6th schedule, the Forest Rights Act, the greater urgency to expand infrastructure, whether it's health infrastructure or any other infrastructure, the greater urgency to expand it the greater urgency for redistribution of rights to nature, and the greater urgency for a universal social protection legislation, which is not coming even with your social security code today. The recognition of most people as workers is one of the most important things that will help people to get these rights, and the recognition and the control and the regulation of corporate capital, which has used the pandemic to, in fact, get more and more resources under their belt. I mean, it's not surprising that several corporate houses have, in fact, increased their profits rather than decrease their profits during the pandemic. So, so I think I'll just end there. I think I've answered almost all the questions. Yes.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Archana. Can we close?
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. It was wonderful listening to you.
Thank you.
Archana, you are there?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So they are thanking. So on behalf of the participants, I would like to thank you for such a comprehensive presentation in a very short time given, but still you have covered the very issue-based areas in which the information is to be disseminated, and also brought out the kind of issues in the pandemic hours. And we have to really wait and see what kind of issues in the red carpet, I mean under the carpet is happening. And as you end up with a note that there may be increased hunger and mortality, it's really worrying. And we have to do as whatever capacity in which we could do. And being the researcher and being activist, I think you would get us informed of what is happening among this Adivasi community. Dr. Neela is here. You can wind up formally.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, and all. I am Dr. Neela, NSS Program Officer and Associate Professor of Business Administration, Kaveri College for Women, Trichy. The pleasure is mine in thanking our today's eminent resource person, Professor Archana Prasad, Professor, Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, for her mind-blowing words about gender issues in tribal community in the COVID pandemic. It's my privilege to thank our dynamic madam, Dr. Mrs. V. Sujata, Principal, Kaveri College for Women, for her continuous support and encouragement to conduct this one-month program successfully. I take this opportunity to thank Professor N. Manimegalai, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Director and Head, Department of Women's Studies, Bhadidasa University, Dr. N. Murugeshwari, Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Bhadidasa University, Dr. S. Shubha, Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Bhadidasa University, for their tireless effort to conduct this program successfully. Finally, I would like to thank all the active participants for this one-month program. Thank you all. Meet you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you, ma'am.
Bye, Archana. See you then.
Bye.
Thank you. Dear participants, the test link will be posted in the chat box tomorrow at the end of the session. Ma'am,
I just want to say that the feedback of this 1 month program could be shared there in the WhatsApp or in the email also. I have just given in that chat box also my mail ID, or it will be available already, or to the mail ID where you have registered. So we are looking for what are the learnings in this 1 month program, and how will it be really be applied in the context of be it in the private individual context, or in the institutional context, or in the community context. I'm sure that some input has gone in under the banner what I should say the gender sensitization, through these discussions. And whoever has come, I think they were highly gender sensitive persons and presented whatever the topic we have given, or it was given by them. It was all highly gender sensitive. And some of the core areas have also been highlighted by some of the speakers as areas of research. And you have to necessarily take up the issues of declining unemployment or declining employment among women, and the other in the context of increasing education, and of course the increasing violence against women in the pandemic. So there are a number of other areas also, and agriculture, farming, why women are not recognized as farmers. And now we talked about Adivasis, and we also had discussions about the transgender and the other vulnerable communities, disabilities, etc. So they have left with us major areas of concern on the one hand, and incidentally communicated to us that it is highly necessary to be gender sensitive to attend the issues. So in that sense, I really expect the participants to share your feedback. It's not simply feedback, it is kind of a report where you will be getting us what has happened, what hasn't happened. You have expected something more, it's not been included, and the people who have interacted with us also presented some given the time limit and the other issues. We could only throw open a minimum, and therefore you try to also suggest other areas which may be considered for the other areas of discussion for the other webinars to come. So I again invite you to share your feedback, because tomorrow we need two people to share your feedback in the valediction. There will be two speakers. Professor Indu Agnigotri will be talking as like everyday class, like till 3:30, and 3:30 to 4 we are going to have the valediction, where Professor Saida Hamid, the former Planning Commission member, she's a Padma Shri, and former Vice Chancellor, who will be talking to us. And so in between you will have 2 to 3 minutes to share your feedback. So kindly prepare yourself to share your feedback in the webinar also. It is not that you will be sharing with us now through mail or through WhatsApp. That is one thing. But I only wish that one male participant or one female participant could throw some light on the feedback or whatever you call there in the valedictorian function. Okay, and we will try to consolidate the feedback that you will be sending and present it to whichever department, including UGC, because in UGC is behind this gender sensitization because of that communication. And the certificates will also be given, as it was already explained to you by Dr. Neela, that you have to go for exam, and there will be 50 questions, multiple choice questions for 1 hour duration, and all questions were drawn from the discussions that the faculty or the invitees they themselves have contributed some questions, and those who are very much on issues based areas, where we did ask them because they are all very intensive researchers and may not find the time to give us questions, and therefore we have taken from that discussion. So I only wish that you will all definitely be finding it comfortable. So please go through all the PowerPoint presentations, etc., which we have been sharing, and also the recorded video, so that it will be comfortable enough for you all to appear for the test. And of course, it is a formality for getting the certificate. Otherwise, it is not testing your knowledge or something like that, because this particular kind of gender sensitization is more to do with changing your mindset, changing the attitude, changing the behavior, rather than scoring marks. So I don't believe in that, but there is some kind of, always we have to go by this in order to grade the certificate. And so that is why it is being done. And so please join with some inputs, reading your own old materials, so that you will be able to definitely go through this exam. And Please ask any doubts through this mail or this WhatsApp. You will definitely be attending because now you may have some questions and which haven't been answered. Okay. Thank you very much. Dr.
Thank you,
Neela.
ma'am.
Vanakkam.
Madam, vanakkam, madam.
Vanakkam.
Mani, madam, vanakkam, madam. Madam, really hats off to you and Neela, madam, because you are doing very well. Apart from this also, you are again conducting 2 more international
Thank you.
webinars
Thank you.
also.
Yeah.
Because due to this, we are not participating
Okay.
in
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I
due to
have to
the
rush
time
now.
problem
It is
and
already 50. I have to join at 4 o'clock. For 55 minutes there in Madurai Kamaraj University. Okay.
Oh, okay, madam.
Tomorrow?
Okay. Madam, after anniversary only now, madam, the test will be conducted.
Conducted
Yeah,
through
maybe
Google
5.
Form. Yes.
5 o'clock. 4.
5
It
o'clock.
may
Four
go
to five,
4.
5.
4 to 5. Make it for
Yes, ma'am.
5 to, because you will be attending some of them will be attending Madurai Kamaraj University also.
Exactly, by the time I
So
can
shall
make
we make it by 5 to 6?
Okay, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Sure,
Yeah,
ma'am.
because they will be attending Madurai Kamaraj University also. Some of the participants who are participants here will also come there. So that is also there till 5 o'clock. So let us make it 5:30 to 6:30, Dr. Neela, so that immediately.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sure, ma'am.
So you can announce there, and if it is announced here, you can make it there also in the
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
WhatsApp. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you all. I'll be pushing off because it is demanded there to come. Thank you.
Okay, madam. Okay, madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Neela, madam. Because as
Thank you.
Neela, madam, you have
Thank
such
you,
a
ma'am.
patient. I am also an previously NSS program officer. Now I am a WC coordinator from Andhra Pradesh. Really,
Yes,
your voice and everything you are managing is very highlighted, madam. Hats off to you once again.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
madam.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you, ma'am.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank
yes,
you,
madam.
ma'am.
Yes, madam.